Money, guns, and lies, a major ruling in Alex Murdaugh's double murder trial and what it means for the jury.
I find that the jury is entitled to consider whether the apparent desperation of Mr. Murdaugh because of his dire financial situation, the threat of being exposed for committing the crimes.
Judge Newman says the jury in Alex Murdaugh's double murder trial can hear evidence of his alleged financial crimes when considering whether he had a motive to murder his wife and son. I'm Angenette Levy, and welcome to Law&Crime's Sidebar podcast. This was a major ruling for the prosecution by Judge Newman on Monday morning. He ruled that prosecutors can tell the jury about Alex Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes and thefts he's actually admitted to show the jury that he actually had a motive, a reliable motive, to murder his wife Maggie and son Paul. Judge Newman said the evidence is more probative than prejudicial, and that was one of the tests he had to use to assess this matter. On Friday, without the jury present, Judge Newman heard testimony from Jan Malinowski, president and CEO of Palmetto State Bank, about Alex Murdaugh's financial condition on the day of the murders.
It's fair to say that as of June of 2021 and the months after, the indebtedness to Palmetto State Bank from Alex Murdaugh was very, very large.
Yes, sir.
And it's fair to say it also had charged off loans in the past. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
If it had come out at any particular time from, let's say, 2010 on up to June of 2021, or at any time, that Alex Murdaugh had been stealing money from his partners or stealing money from his clients, would this bank have continued to loan him money?
No, sir.
Prosecutors say that Alex Murdaugh's financial condition was going to come to light the very same week of the murders because later in the week, he was being forced to produce financial documents in the lawsuit where he was being sued over the boat crash in which Mallory Beach was killed. Murdaugh's defense says he may have been in a financial mess, but they say he was working to get his financial house in order.
Are you aware that Mr. Murdaugh was still paying on the loans that had been written off?
Yes, sir, I was.
And you mentioned that, and had Mr. Murdaugh always paid the bank interest, monies he owed? And did he ever go in default? And let's put it like, did he ever go in default on any notes issued to him by Palmetto State Bank?
Redbeard and Zero United.
And those were the ones that were written off?
Yes, sir.
But he continued to pay those, correct?
He periodically made payments. Yes, sir.
Meanwhile, prosecutors say that Alex Murdaugh was getting preferential treatment that no one else received from Palmetto State Bank simply because of his name and his connections.
Does it say anything about sending $350,000 to Chris Wilson to try to make up the funds that he had diverted from his law firm?
No, sir.
Does it say anything about $400,000 to cover a $347,000 overdraft?
No, sir.
After June 7th was the first significant activity from the bank to Alex to provide that $350,000 off the books with no application whatsoever.
Yes, sir.
And after June the 7th, did his account run to negative $347,000?
Yes, sir.
And the bank kept paying.
Yes, sir.
Perhaps the most generous overdraft policy ever seen.
Quite possibly.
The jury also heard testimony from Paul Greer, a firearms and tool marks examiner from SLED on Friday. And he testified about the two murder weapons in this case. The state, of course, doesn't have those. One is a shotgun and another is a rifle. The defense actually unsuccessfully challenged this evidence before trial, but it came in anyway. And the big question is, without the rifle, how do you determine which gun shot and killed Maggie Murdaugh? Who owned that gun? Can we put it in Alex Murdaugh's hands? So far, they haven't been able to do that. So listen to what firearms examiner Greer told the jury about the rounds found around Maggie Murdaugh's body as he compared them to other rounds found on the property.
After review of the crime scene, where were those located?
After reviewing the crime scene diagram, it's my understanding that those cartridge cases were at marker numbers that were near or around the body of Margaret Murdaugh.
And those would be 300 blackout rounds, is that right?
That's correct. They're 300 blackout caliber.
Or they were spent casings?
Yes, sir. Those are fired cartridge cases.
And State's Exhibit 260, items 35 to 39, what are those again?
Those were all fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases, head stamped with the S&B logo and 300 blackout caliber.
The Murdaughs actually owned 3 blackout rifles. One of them is accounted for. It belonged to Buster Murdaugh, and it's actually in an evidence box in the courtroom, and it was tested. 2 others belonged to Paul. One went missing years and years ago. The other went missing sometime around the homicides. We've heard testimony about this. And it's actually believed that Paul Murdaugh likely had this blackout rifle, the replacement, with him on the night of the murders, because we've heard testimony that he often carried it in his truck or in an ATV to shoot hogs around the property. Here's Murdaugh's lawyer, Jim Griffin, on cross-examination of Paul Greer.
In your opinion, they were fired by one weapon in the world.
It's my opinion that those had all been cycled through the same firearm at one point in time. Yes, sir.
But not fired by the same firearm.
No, sir. That's not what my conclusions say. As far as being fired by that firearm or by the same gun, those results are inconclusive.
So that means that the markings on the breech, because they were all fired, they all have a fire pin hitting the primer, and you call that breech markings, correct?
Yes, sir. Those are breech face markings that we would see on the primer.
And there were dissimilarities between those where you couldn't reach a conclusion.
That's correct. Those shared, again, those same class characteristics. So we compared those to each other. Based on our comparisons, that's correct. There were not enough. There's not enough agreement. There was insufficient agreement there for me to reach a conclusion based on my training and experience and looking at all of these cartridge cases that I could say that they were fired by the same firearm, and that's how we arrived at that conclusion.
The jury also heard testimony on Friday from an expert in fingerprint analysis. It's actually pretty rare to get a fingerprint that you can use in a criminal case. Take a listen.
Do you recall examining some other shotguns or rifles in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be a 300 blackout rifle, a Mossberg shotgun, a Browning shotgun, and another Benelli shotgun?
That's correct.
Did you find any fingerprints on any of those guns?
Nothing that I could identify. Again, the result of no value for comparison was the result that I reported.
The defense has actually pointed out in this case that Alex Murdaugh's fingerprints weren't found on any items of evidence.
So other than the cell phone, everyone else says no fingerprint evidence was observed. That would mean there was nothing, not even a partial, right?
Yes, sir. Anytime that result is in the report, that's what that means, yes.
Other than the cell phone, you didn't even find any evidence of fingerprints, not a partial, not a smudge, not anything.
Well, I believe there were some additional long guns that came into me where I did get no value for comparison, but the initial shotgun that came into me nothing was observed. Yes, sir.
And that's it for this edition of Law and Crime's Sidebar podcast. It is produced by Sam Goldberg and Michael Deininger. Bobby Szoke is our director of YouTube. Alyssa Fisher handles our bookings, and Kiara Bronson does our social media. You can listen to and download Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcast. And of course, you can always watch it on Law and Crime's YouTube channel. I'm Angenette Levy, and we will see you next time.